Warm greetings from Center for National Security Studies. I'm your host, Balasubramanian, Senior Research Officer and Head of India Strategic Studies Program at CNSS. Today, we are in a conversation with Dr. Jehan Perera, Executive Director, National Peace Council of Sri Lanka. Dr. Jehan Perera is a founder member and Executive Director of the National Peace Council of Sri Lanka, established in 1995. The National Peace Council builds public support for a political solution to the ethnic conflict through awareness creation and advocacy and community level engagements. He is also on the board of the People's Action for Free and Fair Elections and the Center for Communication Training. He writes a regularly weekly political column for the national media, focusing on peace building, governance, and reconciliation. He has obtained bachelor's degrees from the Open University of Sri Lanka and Harvard College and a Juris Doctor degree from Harvard Law School. A warm welcome to you, sir, and thank you very much for taking time to be with us.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be with you too.
Let me just quickly go to the first question, sir. What is the current state of Sri Lankan politics and who are the main contenders in the upcoming elections? Can you please give our viewers an overview of the three major candidates and what happens if none of them cross the 50% mark? How does the situation get resolved?
Well, Sri Lanka is poised on the brink of possible radical change. This stems from the economic collapse and the protest movement that you might have seen 2.5 years ago in 2022, where we saw tens of thousands of people on the streets demonstrating because there were great economic hardships at that time, where the government ran out of foreign currency to import essentials such as fuel, gas, medicine, foodstuff, and there were power cuts for over 12 hours. And the basic reason was that Sri Lanka defaulted on its international debt because it had no foreign exchange. Now, at that time, India stepped in and gave us $4 billion in assistance, emergency assistance. And I remember we were looking forward to those Indian grants that came because they were a lifesaver to us. They brought us help to bring the fuel ships in, which were otherwise in the dock, in the port, not unloading till the money was given to them. So it was a very terrible situation at that time. And I see the present elections as coming out of that crisis. The protest movement of 2022 is now reaching its climax at this election. And we will be looking to see whether, in the people's view, the actions of the president who took over at that critical time when the former president fled the country and a new president, Wickremesinghe, was elected by parliament, whether his actions have won the support of the majority of people, or whether at the other extreme, whether the people still continue to be very dissatisfied and want radical change. Because what we have at the moment is the prospect of radical change, where a party that has in the past never got more than 5 to 6% of the vote. In fact, at the last presidential election, their candidate, the candidate is now contesting for the National People's Party. He got only 3% of the vote. But this time, he is now believed to be the front runner at these elections. So the possibility of very radical change exists. So to come to your question about the candidates, well, there are three main candidates. And the first of them would be the president, Ranil Wickremesinghe. He's an experienced politician, I think been in parliament for over 40 years or maybe 50 years. And extremely knowledgeable, very cosmopolitan. And he is credited with leading the country very skillfully out of a potential Bangladesh type of situation. Because we see in Bangladesh, the interim government is unable to control the situation, and the economic and social situation in Bangladesh is deteriorating. But in Sri Lanka, President Wickremesinghe took over a situation that was sliding in that direction, but in a very quick, short period of time, like in less than a week, he stabilized the situation. He stabilized it. He was able to restore law and order. That was the first important thing he did. He, in a very clinical way, he restored law and order, brought back discipline into the country. And secondly, he was able to negotiate with the international lenders, in particular the IMF, and get the foreign exchange crisis resolved. So he's a candidate. The second person would be the opposition leader. His name Sajith Premadasa. He's the son of a former president, President Ranasinghe Premadasa, who in 1993 was assassinated by the LTTE, the Tamil Tigers. Like his father, opposition leader Premadasa is very committed to uplifting the poor and the common man. That is his focus. And it is also seen in the manner of his speeches, his presentations, which sometimes the more educated, the intelligentsia sort of, they try to downplay his speeches because he's speaking to the common man in a simple way, in an easy to access way, but then he's criticized for that, for speaking in too simple language and talking about very simple things. He used to be the deputy to President Ranil Wickremesinghe in another party, in the party that Ranil Wickremesinghe was then heading. But he did not get a good, although he was deputy, he was not trusted, he was not given the power, which led him to break away from Ranil Wickremesinghe's party. So he's the second candidate. And third candidate is the head of the National People's Party, Anura Disanayake. Now, the National People's Party is a new creation. It is really an umbrella group for what is really the JVP, the People's Liberation Front. Now, the JVP is a party that has Marxist origins. And on two occasions, in 1971 and 1988, it revolted against the Sri Lankan state. And in fact, there were tens of thousands of killings during that period by both the JVP, but on a larger scale by the state. The state repression was even greater than what the JVP did, but the JVP also killed in a very brutal way. And this is one memory that's there in the older generation of people, because 1988, 89, now that's about 35 years ago. So people under the age of 40 don't have a first-hand experience of that. So they are now this is the party that up to now, for the last 30 years, has been trying to get into democratic politics and do well. And they have never been able to get more than 3 to 6% of the vote. But this time, now it seems as if they're going to get 30%, 40%, maybe even 50%. Now, Anura Disanayake, unlike Ranil Wickremesinghe and Sajith Premadasa, comes from a more rural background. He's Sinhala speaking. He does not speak English well, but he's very articulate in the Sinhala language, very rational. He speaks the truth and without exaggeration. But he has a Marxist background, which is downplayed. It's not seen. In fact, the election manifesto of the National People's Party is a very modern, forward-looking, attractive document. It does not show the JVP ideology of Marxism. The JVP ideology of Marxism is on their website, in the JVP political party website. But in the National People's Party, it comes across as a forward-looking, caring party, a modern party. His strength in this context is that, unlike the other two leaders, President Ranil Wickremesinghe and opposition leader Sajith Premadasa, this person, Anurakumara Dissanayake, is not connected, tied, or enmeshed with the vested interests, the corrupt vested interests that the other two leaders have to deal with. Because Anurakumara Dissanayake has always been in a small political party, out of power. He has not moved, or he doesn't appear to have moved with the rich and the powerful. So there is a lot of confidence and hope in the general population, in the voting population, that he will be different, he will make a change. The main issue at these elections is, as I said, the continuation of the protest movement. It is what's called what the protest movement demanded was system change. And when they demanded system change, what they were really asking for is an end to corruption, end to widespread corruption among the leadership of the country. And secondly, they want new faces. So Anurakumara Dissanayake was promising both. He's promising he will catch all the rogues, he will get back the stolen money, and if people vote for him and his party, they'll be voting for new faces. So there will be system change. So that's a summary that I would give of the candidates and the background.
You have mentioned about radical change, elections, and how it is going to shape up how Sri Lanka is going to come out of the crisis. My question is, how do you think Sri Lanka's political economy has evolved since the 2022 meltdown, and what is the general outlook among the common people and the middle class, especially?
Well, in 2022, when the government declared that it could not repay its debts, in effect that it was internationally bankrupt, the exchange rate fell by like 100%, from 200 rupees to a dollar. It went up to like 400 rupees. Prices increased tremendously. The economy shrank. Inflation was officially 70%, but probably much more. People lost their savings. Then came the IMF program. The government under the new president negotiated with the IMF, and the IMF gave financial assistance, gave the dollars we needed, but conditioned on Sri Lanka government meeting strict targets, financial targets, reducing the budget deficit, reducing government spending, increasing the government revenues. Now here, the actions taken by the government in keeping with the IMF agreement has been seen by the general population as targeting the poor more than the rich. For instance, when in order to restructure the domestic debt, the Sri Lankan debt, so the government has to pay less in terms of interest and reduce its expenses, thereby the government preferred to restructure the pension funds, the state pension funds, which are of the working people, rather than restructure the banks, the bank deposits, the money held by banks. And the reason that they spared the banks and hit the pension fund was because their fear was that the banks are too important to collapse. If the taxation, if the restructuring affected the banks too much, then the bank system might collapse, and then the whole economy would collapse. So the safer target was the pension funds of the poor, of the working people. So government got quite unpopular because of that, and also President Ranil Wickremesinghe, in order to increase the government revenue, he also increased the tax rate, very significantly increased the tax rate. For instance, anyone earning more than about 100,000 Sri Lankan rupees a month, that is about 25,000 Indian rupees, is taxed. They start getting taxed at the rate of at 25,000 Indian or 100,000 Sri Lankan. And the tax rate goes up to 36%. So now a lot of people who are not paying taxes before are having to pay taxes. And so they are very resentful about this, because what they feel is, look, the prices have doubled. Our salaries have not increased. But now we are being taxed at these high rates. So it's very difficult for us to live. So there's a lot of resentment about that. And I think that is one reason why President Wickremesinghe is facing an uphill task at these elections, because in order to restore the economy, he took action, or he felt he had to take action that affected the economic well-being of the majority of people. But on the other hand, the big businesses and the banks and the corporates, they tend to be supporting President Wickremesinghe because they feel that he rescued the economy, that if not for what he did, the economy would have collapsed. So they are very appreciative of Wickremesinghe's economic policies. But during this last 2.5 years, what we can see is that the gap between the rich and the poor has grown. And so there is a reaction to that. And the reaction also favors the opposition leader as well as the NPP candidate who say, verbally they say that they are for the poor. And so they are getting electorally attractive as a result.
Just to enlarge the scope of this discussion, do you think the 2022 crisis has led to the formation of a new middle class? And how do you think this group is adapting to the current socio-economic challenges?
No, I won't say that we have a new middle class, because a new middle class arises where there is prosperity, where the economy is growing, it's booming, and then people who are in the lower class or working class now rise to the middle class. No, in our case, it's the reverse. What we have is that the middle class has got impoverished. They have become poor. They are now living on the margins. As I said, they are being taxed heavily. The prices have gone up, but their salaries have not gone up. So the middle class, what is remaining of the middle class, what they are wanting is immediate relief. And the presidential candidates are offering that. Actually, all three. Now, even the president, who was very tough on the economy and he didn't give concessions, he didn't give subsidies, he didn't give salary increases, because he said the country can't afford it. Now, even he is offering all that. Just before the election, he's offering to reduce taxes, and he's offering to increase salaries. Of course, he's saying that now, after 2.5 years of his stewardship, the economy is ready to enable those benefits to be given to the people. So all three candidates are offering subsidies, welfare, and lowering of taxes.
So regarding elections, what factors are the most important to voters in the upcoming election, and what could be the outcomes mean for Sri Lanka in the short and long term?
The most important factors at the election is the desire for a change. That is the most catchy slogan, the slogan of systems change, which was articulated during the protest movement of 2022. And our question is, what is this system change? And my summary definition of systems change is an end to corruption. That's what people want. They want a system of government where the leaders, the rulers, are not looting the economy, are not just making money on any deal that takes, any infrastructure project the belief is that they are robbing, they're getting 20%, 30% of the contract value. So the people are very sick and tired of this, and they just, because they think that it also contributed to the economy collapsing, and all of them now suffering as a result. So the important factor is to eliminate corruption. And the second important factor also is to get new people who are not dishonest and honest people, to vote away the old and bring in the new. That is one extreme. At the other extreme, then there is also the concern about stability, because there is a fear that if we go for too radical change at this time when we are very vulnerable economically, we are just getting out of the hole, out of the pit. And at this time when we are just getting out of the pit, if change is too radical, too much, then we can fall again, we can slip back again into the pit. So there is also a strong desire for stability and continuity, which the present president is tapping into, because he is widely seen as having done a good job in terms of stabilizing the economy and now getting it to recover. So these are the two extremes that I see: stability on the one hand, change on the other. So these are the two whole extremes. And in the middle is change with continuity, which is more on the lines of what the opposition leader Sajith Premadasa is offering. He's also saying things will change, but he's saying in a way that it will be in keeping with the present system, whereas the JVP, their feeling is that they will come up with some new system, but no one is really sure what this new system is.
Speaking of young voters, how do the younger generation and minority groups especially perceive the current socio-political and economic situation in Sri Lanka? Because in a way, this presidential election is very, unprecedented and represents a generational change. So do you think in this scenario, the minority parties get to redress their grievance to their satisfaction?
Yeah, I think it's common, all generations, the young as well as the old, all are disappointed with the status quo. They are disappointed with what Sri Lanka has become over the past 75 years. Because at the time of independence, Sri Lanka was regarded as a very a country with great prospects. We were called by the departing British the Switzerland of the East, that we could become the Switzerland of the East. But instead, we are seeing countries that we were in front of in the 1960s. In the 1960s, the income levels in Sri Lanka, the standard of living was comparable to Singapore and even South Korea. But now we are just far, far behind. And more recently, we were ahead of Vietnam, which was destroyed by war, the war with the Americans. But today, now our per capita income is less than Vietnam, and Vietnam is getting huge amounts of foreign investment. We are getting hardly anything. So all generations are disappointed, and the younger generation in particular, because the younger generation, they are idealistic. They think things could have been so much better. And so what we are finding is that among the younger generation, there is a flight abroad, because the younger people also can go, they can travel, they can leave the country. They are leaving the country. They are leaving the country to get jobs in foreign countries. And if we ask the youth, would you like to go abroad and work? Almost, I think the vast majority would be happy to go, except that they can't go. But if they had the opportunity, they would probably go. Now, what is happening today to the youth of all communities, of all ethnicities, was more specific to the Tamil ethnicity earlier. Because during the time of the war, and even in the aftermath of the war, because of the suspicion about Tamils and the destruction of the economy in the areas they were living in, because the war was being fought there, the Tamil youth wanted to leave. Lots of them left the country because they felt that Sri Lanka was not offering them anything. They didn't have a bright future in the country. Now, this phenomenon of the Tamil youth leaving has been now taken on by the other youth, Sinhala youth, Muslims, all want to leave the country. Now, the issue of the minorities is also something like that the minorities are, in a way, the Tamils in particular are feeling very disenchanted. They say that the Sri Lankan state has really never looked after their interests. And so at this presidential election, the Tamil of the north and east, that's the Sri Lankan Tamils who fought for a separate country, they are now putting forward the demand for a Tamil candidate. They are saying they have nominated a Tamil candidate. There's a Tamil candidate. They know for a fact that the Tamil candidate can't win the election. But in a way, it's like a protest vote to them, a symbolic vote to show that they are behind a Tamil candidate, because on the grounds that the mainstream political candidates, the president, the opposition leader, the NPP leader, that they don't have faith that they will, if elected, do anything for the Tamil people. So it's a sort of a protest vote among the Tamils. But having said all this, I must also say that in this election, we have not seen nationalism and racism. As we saw in earlier elections, in almost all our earlier elections, the issue of nationalism, national sovereignty, the threat to the nation posed by the ethnic minorities, it used to come up. It was an important issue. At this election, it has not come. And there are two reasons for that. One reason is that the economic crisis has come to the center stage. It's at the forefront. It's at the center of people's concerns. And so in that sense, the ethnic issue has receded in importance to the back. But the second reason is that these three main political candidates that we have actually not been racist in their political lives. For the longest time that I can think of, I have not heard any of them speak in really a racist way against another. There have been occasions when they might have said something that hurt an ethnic minority, but in general, they are not racist. They are not racist politicians, and they have stood up for the minorities when it was necessary. So this also is a positive feature, the fact that the ethnic issue, racism, nationalism, and the ethnic issue is not being used by the three main candidates to get more votes from people. I think it's a positive thing, and I think it is something that we need to build on after the election, because I think it's time that there is some sort of resolution of this issue where the Tamils and the minorities are asking for more power sharing, so that it's not the Sinhala ethnic majority that's making the decisions, that's taking the calls, but also the ethnic minorities, the Tamils and the Muslims also share in the decision making. That system we need, that's one of the big challenges we need to overcome. And I think if this is a chance, opportunity to overcome it, because we need to be a united people if we are to face the economic challenge and overcome it.
Moving on to my next question, what is your view or understanding of the role of the Buddhist clergy, the Christian church, and other religious authorities in this election, sir?
Yeah, right. I mean, as I said, ethnic and racism are at a low ebb at this election. The Buddhist clergy have been not raising ethnic issues at this election. The ones who have been, in a way, are the Christians, because the Christians are still feeling very angry at what happened in 2019. In 2019, there was a big bombing. It's called the Easter bombing on Easter Sunday. 10 suicide bombers went and attacked 3 Christian churches and 3 hotels, tourist hotels, and over 250 people died. The suicide bombers were all Muslim. Now, there has been a big suspicion in the country as to who was behind this bombing, because it made no sense for Muslims to attack Christians in Sri Lanka. Because the Muslim-Christian relationship is not a bad one in Sri Lanka. Both the Christians and the Muslims are minorities. They both actually sometimes they feel under pressure from the Buddhist majority. But they don't, the Christians and Muslims don't have any problem among themselves. So then why did one minority go and attack another minority? So it made no sense. But it made sense politically, because it helped the nationalists in the government, the racists in the government, to use this fact that the Muslims had attacked and say that, oh, the country faces a big national security threat. We need to strengthen the military. We need to strengthen the security laws. We need to protect the Sinhala nation. And they campaigned on that basis and won the election. But the Christians are very angry. Think the truth of why this attack took place has never been found. Commissions, government appointed commissions, but the commissions, the decisions of the commission were not implemented. So the Christians have a grievance, and they say that they are looking for a political leader or a new government that will actually investigate what happened. And both the opposition candidates, that's the opposition leader and the National People's Party leader, have promised genuine, fresh inquiries and action with regard to the Easter bombing. The Buddhists, as I said, the Buddhist clergy is not very active in this election. And the reason is, as I said, that the issue of racism and nationalism has not come up. So they are not active as a result. But however, there is this concern among some of the Buddhist clergy. They feel that the NPP, the Marxist party, may be not so respectful of religion. So in our country, in Sri Lanka, the Buddhist religion is given a special place. In the constitution, it is given the foremost place. And Buddhist monks are very much revered and given pride of place to. They're given deference. And often the leaders of government go and ask them for advice and don't do things without their blessings. Now the JVP, the NPP, being a Marxist sort of party, has a more rational approach. It's very secular-minded. And therefore, they don't pay so much deference to religious clergy. So that has upset the Buddhist clergy. And I've heard some of the Buddhist clergy openly telling the people not to vote for what they consider to be anti-religious parties. But actually, a JVP is not anti-religious. JVP is secular, and I think I'm in favor of that. I think we need to move in a secular way. Secular, where you respect religion. Religion is part of our culture. All religions are part of our culture. We respect religion, but we can't give deference to religion and get guidance from religious clerics on things which they know nothing about. And all religions should be treated equally, and all citizens also should be equal. JVP is in that direction. So, but the Buddhist religious clergy are not so happy with that. I can sense that.
Could you also comment on the present status and the future of the provincial councils, sir?
Yeah, the provincial councils were set up in 1987. In 1987, Sri Lanka was going through its civil war. The government was battling the LTT. Now, what gave sustenance to the LTT, what gave them the people's support, the support of the Tamil people, was the sense that the Tamil people are being dominated by the Sinhala people, because Sinhalese are majority, they are 75%. So in the central parliament, if ever there's an issue where the Sinhalese are thinking one way and the Tamils are thinking another way, then always the Sinhalese majority will prevail because they have more numbers. So the solution that the Tamils have put forward is that in the areas they have a majority, like the northern province, the eastern province, that power should be devolved to them. Like the Indian states, like Tamil Nadu is a state by itself, and there are certain powers given to the Tamil Nadu government that it can use without referring to Delhi. So same system for Sri Lanka. But now the fact, India actually supported us to come up with the provincial council system. It was part of the Indo-Lanka Accord, peace accord, whereby India said we will disarm the Tamil tigers, but in turn, the Sri Lankan government must implement a semi-federal sort of solution, which is the provincial council system. So, anyway, because this happened during a time of war, where there was a very strong separatist movement, the LTT, in the Tamil areas, the provincial council system, although it was meant as a solution to that problem, by giving the Tamils devolving power, then the Tamils feel we don't have to support the LTT anymore because we have got now a democratic structure where we have some powers of self-determination. We don't need the LTT to fight for our self-determination. The Sri Lankan government has given it to us. But then the Sri Lankan government and the Sinhala people were very worried about this. They said, this will strengthen the LTT. This will lead to separation because now LTT will control these provincial councils. So it was never properly implemented. And even to this day, there is resistance in the psyche of government leaders and the Sinhala ethnic majority to the provincial council system. As a result, for the past 5 years, the provincial councils have not been functioning at all. Their elections have not been held to them. Part of the reason being there was a attempt made to change the electoral system under which the provincial councils operate, and there was no motivation to get that process finalized. So now there is no law under which the elections can be held, and so elections have been postponed for 5 years. But as a result, the Tamil people are feeling again very frustrated, and the three main presidential candidates, because they're also now seeking Tamil votes, they have promised that if they are elected, each one of them has promised, they will implement the 13th Amendment. They will get the provincial council system operating once more. In that, the most positive has been the opposition leader, Sajith Premadasa, who has said he will not only implement the 13th Amendment, the provincial council system, but he will also implement the granting to the provincial councils of land and police powers, which has not been done from the time it was first formulated in 1987. The land powers and police powers of the provincial councils, although specified in the constitution, have never been given to the provincial councils by the government. I believe it's against the law. But no one has also filed action in the courts about this. And but the opposition leader, Sajith Premadasa, said if he is elected president, he will not only implement the 13th Amendment, set up the provincial councils once again, but he'll also devolve the police and land powers to the provinces. So that's the present status.
So how do you think Sri Lanka's elections and their potential outcomes are viewed by the foreign observers?
Well, I think when you say foreign observer, maybe you're interested in how the international community views these elections.
Yeah. Yes.
The international community would view the elections, I suppose, largely from some sort of geopolitical angle. They would be interested in which country or power bloc Sri Lanka gets closer to. It's a little hard to say because on that I would say that President Wickremesinghe, his view is something like is to have good relations with all countries and to do business with all. His approach would be he will do business with all countries. But he's also, he's mindful of India's security concerns with regard to China. He also is a great proponent of closer linkage with Tamil Nadu. He supports a land bridge to Tamil Nadu, and he supports free trade agreements with Tamil Nadu. Now, on that, he is in advance of the people, because the people of Sri Lanka, the Sinhala people in particular, but also the Tamil people, they're a little worried about the land bridge, because they think that if there's a land bridge, that then Sri Lanka will be, very vulnerable to large numbers of Indians coming into Sri Lanka and taking over Sri Lanka. That type of fear is there, concern is there. And even of having free trade agreements with India, instead of seeing that as a positive opportunity for Sri Lanka to do business in a larger environment, the concern is that Indian goods will come in, and Indian goods which are produced at a cheaper rate will all come into the market and kill Sri Lankan manufacturers. So there is concern about too much economic closeness to India, because of sense that Sri Lanka can't compete with India, and Indians will dominate Sri Lanka. So, but President Wickremesinghe has an idea that he should work more closely with India. But he'll also work closely with other countries. He'll work closely with China and the West. Sajith Premadasa, the opposition leader, I think would also be kind of like-minded to Ranil Wickremesinghe in that respect. He has not spoken about this land bridge and closer economic ties with India, but I think both he and both Sajith Premadasa and President Wickremesinghe are conscious of the importance of India and India's security concerns, geopolitical concerns, and they would steer clear of getting too close to China. Even though China also has advantages to Sri Lanka. It has a lot of money. It can invest in Sri Lanka. It sells its goods at a cheaper rate. But they would be conscious that there's a limit to the business they can do in China, because of India, but also because of the Western countries. The Western countries also don't want China to get too much into Sri Lanka, because they don't want Sri Lanka to become part of China's sort of geopolitical and military strategy, especially with regard to keeping the sea lanes open. So there is a concern on the part of both India and the Western world that Sri Lanka, when it does business with China, should not become part of China's security system. That's the concern. I suppose they don't mind us doing business, but as long as we don't become part of China's security system. Now, the JVPs, that's where things are not clear at all, because we don't really know where the JVP stands on these issues. There are people who say that China supports JVP, because both are Marxist countries, but I really don't know. And this also brings up a serious concern about the JVP, that the JVP, although the JVP is contesting this election as the National People's Party, and the National People's Party is a larger formation where there is intellectuals, university teachers, civil society, religious clergy, all in the National People's Party, but at the core of it is the JVP. Now, what we are concerned, what we wonder is that supposing the JVP, the National People's Party wins the presidential election, that the real decision makers will be in the JVP, not the National People's Party, because that is like more the fluff. And the core of it is the JVP. And then when you come to the JVP, then you find this problem of opaqueness, non-transparency, not knowing what's the decision-making process within and who's making the decisions. Now, I referred that specifically with regard to China. We are not sure what the relationship with China is. So it's a larger problem that we don't know what the JVP's real policies are going to be on a lot of other issues, on, say, freedom of civil society, on dealing with foreign investment. We are not sure. Although the NPP in its policy statement, in its manifesto, has said all the nice things, all good things. just as good as the manifesto of President Wickremesinghe or opposition leader Premadasa. It's equally good, it's equally wonderful to read, but we are not sure how these things will be implemented, and it's especially in the case of the JVP, which is a Marxist party, not so transparent, and which has been, in the past at least, it used violence. So that concern in the society.
So moving on to my last question. Finally, what key challenges do you think should the incoming president prioritize, and what steps should be taken to address them?
Well, I would say that the priority is, well, certainly it has to be the economic recovery, because it's the economy that bears on the people's lives. It affects people's lives in every aspect, whether you have money or not. So economic recovery has to be given priority, and within the frame of economic recovery, there has to be more attention given to the poorer sections of the population who are really finding it very hard to survive. So it has to be economic recovery with welfare protection, with compassion, and also some way to ensure that the fruits of development go directly to the poorer section and not all be accumulated by the richer section, which is what is happening now. So that's quite a challenge, because globally we see a pattern where the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. So we have to go in a new direction, a different direction, which is quite challenging in a time when we have no resources also, and when we are in an economic pit and trying to get out of it. The second major issue, I think, would be to tackle the problem of corruption. This has to be done. Of course, tackling corruption also is not going to be easy, supposing the JVP comes in, because corruption is throughout the society. And those who have engaged in corrupt practices are very powerful. That's how they are corrupt, and that's how they became corrupt. And it's their power that enables them to do corrupt things. So society to be handled a little carefully, because it has to be a gradual process. Because if you try to catch all the rogues in one shot, then they will all gang together, and we don't know what will happen. So I think it has to be done in a phased manner, and also the concern that it should be done it has to also be done through the rule of law. It can't be done ad hoc catching of rogues as people think can be done. It has to be done through the rule of law, through judiciary, and through proper prosecutions. So that's the second challenge. But we need to tackle the problem of corruption, which is why the JVP or the NPP is so popular, because they say they will. And third, we have to also correct the historical wrongs done to ethnic minorities. The one that is very well known now are the Sri Lanka Tamils. What happened to them in the war? Disappeared, missing persons. They lost their land taken over by the military. They need to reconstruct their lives. But then there is also the issue of the Tamils of Indian origin. They were the first victims of unjust Sri Lankan practices. In 1948, when we got independence, the second largest minority in our country, or the largest minority in our country were the Tamils of recent Indian origin. They now call themselves the Malaiha Tamils, the upcountry, the hill country Tamils. They came with the British. Or they were rather brought by the British to work they were brought from Tamil Nadu to work on the tea plantations in Sri Lanka, because at that time Tamil Nadu was very poor and Sri Lanka offered better economic prospects. So these people were working on the tea plantation, but when we got independence, the Sri Lankan government said that they should go back to India, and took away their citizenship rights. And So some of them went back to India, but those who remained have suffered after that. They have got their citizenship rights now about 40 years ago, but they still remain the poorest section of the Sri Lankan people. So there is a need for them also to obtain justice, not just the Sri Lanka Tamils who suffered during the war, but the plantation or Malaya Tamils who lost their citizenship right at the time we got independence. So these are, I think, some of the important tasks remaining that the new president needs to take on: economic recovery, tackling corruption, and correcting of historical wrongs, and thereby rebuilding the trust in the Sri Lankan people of each other and the trust of the people with the state. Because unless there's a trusting relationship between the rulers and the ruled and between the ethnic and religious communities, it will be difficult for Sri Lanka to progress in a very forceful way forward to economic recovery.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. A big thank you, and I extend my sincere gratitude to our guest, Dr. Jehan Perera, for spending valuable time with us and offering such invaluable insights. Thank you very much, sir. Okay. To our audience, I hope you found our discussion insightful and thought-provoking. Thank you for tuning in and being a part of this conversation. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.